Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for November the 11th. Today we are reading together from Psalm 132. Psalm 132 has been given the title in my Bible, David and Zion Chosen. This is once again a song of ascents. We are starting today our final week in the Songs of Ascents with 132 today, 133 on Wednesday, and 134 on Friday. Once we get here to this final section of the Songs of Ascents, we really do lose, I think, the pattern that has developed for the most part throughout these Psalms up until this point, where we see sets of three. We've seen four sets of three, pretty tightly within these sections. I think towards the end of the uh, latter section, this last section, section four, Psalms 28, 128, 129, 130, we kind of got away from that pattern a little bit as well. But for sure, in Psalms 120 through 120, 26, we see this pattern um, of lament leading to confidence, and then ending in a psalm that is focused on Zion. Zion has been a major theme throughout these psalms, and that makes sense because, again, many people believe that the songs of ascents were sung and were worshipped to as people were making their way from where they lived to Jerusalem for various celebrations and festivals there at the temple that took place on a yearly basis. So it makes sense that you would have kind of journey type themes to these Psalms. And I think we see that today here in Psalm 132, because we're going to have this Psalm in speaking about David, his focus on bringing the ark to Jerusalem, where we see David being very committed to Yahweh and bringing his footstool, the ark, to Jerusalem, making that journey from Kiriath Jearim to Jerusalem. And then we see in the last half of the psalm here Yahweh's commitment to David. And again, there is a process that's taking place here within this psalm. So you would think as people were going up to Jerusalem to worship, it makes sense that they would focus on a psalm, or focus and worship according to a psalm such as this one, which has these really, really important themes of Yahweh's Davidic covenants. So with those thoughts being said, let me go and get the text up on the screen, and we'll read together here in Psalm 132. Psalm 132, beginning in verse number 1. I haven't mentioned it yet, but I believe this psalm, again, doesn't fall greatly into the lament, confidence, Zion pattern of many of the songs of ascents. But more so, I think what we have here is certainly a messianic psalm. I think there are also some Zion flavors here. There's some confidence here as well. You might be able to say early on there are some elements of lament as well, as David is lamenting the fact that God's ark is not where it needs to be. So we have just a number of different categories that this psalm could fit into, certainly not just one alone that it fits neatly into. With that said, let's read here Psalm 132, beginning in verse number 1. Psalm 132, verse number 1, Yahweh, remember David and all the hardships he endured, and how he swore an oath to Yahweh, making a vow to the mighty one of Jacob. I will not enter my house or get into my bed. I will not allow my eyes to sleep or my eyelids to slumber until I find a place for Yahweh, a dwelling for the mighty one of Jacob. We heard of the ark in Ephrathah. We found it in the fields of Jaar. Let's go to his dwelling place. Let's worship at his footstool. Rise up, Yahweh. Come to your resting place, you and your powerful ark. May your priests be clothed with righteousness, and may your faithful people shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, do not reject your anointed one. Yahweh swore an oath to David, a promise he will not abandon. I will set one of your offspring on your throne. If your sons keep my covenants and my decrees that I will teach them, their sons will also sit on your throne forever. For Yahweh has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his home. This is my resting place forever. I will make my home here because I have desired it. I will abundantly bless its food. I will satisfy its needy with bread. I will clothe its priests with salvation, and its faithful people will shout for joy. There I will make a horn grow for David. I have prepared a lamp for my anointed one. I will clothe his enemies with shame, but the crown he wears will be glorious. Psalm 132, again, a much longer psalm than what we've seen so far in these songs of ascents. The psalm begins with a request to Yahweh that he would remember David. Remember David and all the hardships he endured. I don't think that I would probably lean towards David being the actual author of this psalm. Um, I don't think a psalm would have to say of David to 100% solidify that it belongs to David. David could have written it and it just not been labeled as such at some point along the way. But it does seem like this psalm would have been written sometime pretty quickly, I guess, either towards the end of David's reign or right after his reign, because I say that because part of Solomon's uh, part of Solomon's prayer concerning the building of the temple in Second Samuel chapter 6. Let me go here and double check this real fast. Second Samuel chapter 6, beginning in verse number 41. Yes, Solomon's prayer concerning the dedication of the temple. Verses 41 and 42 are actually a quotation of Psalm 132 and verses 8, 9, and 10. So, the question comes, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? I'd probably say the psalm. It would make sense to me that the psalm would come first here within that context. So maybe this was something that was written in conjunction with the building of the temple. Maybe David has already passed on, and the temple is being completed now, and as they're bringing the ark into its final resting place in that sense, they say, oh well, let's think about David and all that he did for God and his commitment to Yahweh. That's what we see in the first 10 verses is David's commitment to Yahweh. And the author here says, again, makes the request of Yahweh that he would remember David for all the hardships he endured. I think in context here, the idea is probably the hardships or the afflictions or the great desire that he had for the ark to have a home and for Yahweh himself to have a home. Let's not forget that David wanted to build a house for God. He wanted to build the temple for God, but he was not able to do so. And I'm sure that would have grieved David to some extent. And whenever he saw the ark not being where it needed to be, that grieved David to an extent. So remember him for the seriousness with which he thought about you, Lord, and your place, your temple, or your house and your ark. And remember how he was so dedicated to that, to not in verses 3 and 4, to not go to his house or to get into his bed or to take any sleep until he found a place for Yahweh, a dwelling for the mighty one of Jacob. So David here recognizes fully the desire that he has for God to be taken care of and how he wasn't going to be selfish, focus on himself, but focus on Yahweh and honoring him. So you get to verses 6 to 7, we heard that the ark was in Ephrathah, or that's another word for another name for Bethlehem. They go there and it's not there. So then we found it in the fields of Jaar, or it could also be Kiriath Jearim. So they found it and they say, well, let's go to Jerusalem. Let's go to worship at his footstool. Remember, the ark was recognized as the footstool. And in doing so, David and others would have said in this procession, rise up, Yahweh, come to your resting place, you and your powerful ark. This was a common sentiment that was spoken whenever the ark was on the move, especially during the days of Moses. Because remember, the ark was seen as the presence of God. It was his footstool wherever the ark went, wherever the tabernacle went. There was God with them, also manifested in the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So rise up, Lord, as we move forward. And may your priests be clothed with righteousness. May your faithful people shout for joy. These are the benefits of being in God's presence. They are signs of God's presence being confirmed among the people. So for the sake of your servant David, again, looking back and recognizing David's commitment to Yahweh, for the sake of your servant David, do not reject your anointed one. Do not reject the king Allow your presence to continue to be with him. So verses 1 through 10, total commitment from David to Yahweh concerning honoring and glorifying him by giving him a house and specifically giving him a place for the ark to rest. You might also just write a note if you're taking any notes. Psalm 24 and Psalm 68. Psalm 24 and Psalm 68 also, many people believe, have allusions to this event that they speak as they speak about the glory of God. Again, Psalm 24 and Psalm 68. And then God's Davidic covenant is certainly in view here as well, especially once we get to verse 11 through the end of the chapter, that Davidic covenant that was established in 2 Samuel chapter 7. So speaking of that, we see Yahweh's commitment to David, that Yahweh swore an oath to David, a promise that he will not abandon. A promise he will not abandon. Remember, Brother Steve Peeler spoke to us this past Wednesday about Yahweh's nature and character, and that he cannot lie. So if he swears an oath to David, that oath is certainly going to come to pass. And what was that oath? That I will set one of your offspring on your throne. So we have the Davidic lineage of Israel's rulers. But there is a condition here that if your sons keep my covenant and my decrees, I will teach them. Their sons will also sit on your throne forever. Again, we think about Israel or the southern kingdom of Judah eventually coming to an end. And there no longer being a king sitting on the throne for quite some time. We're thinking, oh no. Well, I guess they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And that's true, they didn't. That's the whole reason Judah specifically went into exile is because they did not remain faithful and loyal to Yahweh's covenant. So they were punished in that way. However, we recognize, there we go, we recognize that there is another level to this that is certainly messianic in nature. So Yahweh then has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his home. This is my resting place forever. I will make my home here because I have desired it. I will abundantly bless its food, satisfy its needy with bread, clothe its priests with salvation. Its faithful people will shout for joy. So we think about verse 16 with the priest and the salvation and the faithful ones and joyful shouting. That's an answer to verse 9. Remember, may your priests be clothed with righteousness. May your faithful people shout for joy. Yahweh saying, I hear you, and I will establish that. And think about, again, while the people were faithful, the people enjoyed these blessings. But then at some point they weren't faithful. Yet God restored them through the Messiah and in his kingdom, through his leadership. This is certainly true for us as Christians today. So therefore I will make a horn grow for David, verse 17. I prepared a lamp for my anointed one. The crown he wears will be glorious, and this is contrasted with the clothing his enemies with shame. So we have a horn, we have a lamp, we have a crown, we have power, we have clarity, we have glory for Yahweh's anointed. Again, his anointed who though? Well, his anointed king. King according to what line? The line of David. The Davidic messianic king is certainly in play here. And I think that would have been something that would have been recognized at some point along the way. Once the line of David was broken, quote unquote broken, in the fact that there was not actually a king sitting on a throne within Israel, people probably started to see the grander nature of this promise. So we certainly see it today from our perspective that what is being referred to here and ultimately what is ultimately fulfilled by God through this psalm is the messianic king. Because these things still remain true today. There is David's son sitting on his throne right now. And that is our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. King Jesus is the son of David. And he sits on that throne and will sit on that throne forever. He will never pass. He will never be dethroned. He will never give up. He will never be, that authority and that glory will never be taken from him. For he is God's Davidic king and he has been established. And then we think about all these other blessings that we enjoy. Again, you think about a king and his literal kingdom, the blessing of food and bread, salvation, joy. Those things continue to be enjoyed today by God's people, and ultimately in a spiritual sense through the salvation of Jesus. But then also think about the power and the clarity and the glory that we get to share in as Jesus's people, as the citizens of his kingdom. We enjoy his power. We enjoy his clarity. We enjoy his glory as the one who we serve under and who we follow and who we are committed to. Just as David was committed to Yahweh, we must be committed to Yahweh as well. And we can have the guarantee, because God never lies, because his promises never fail, that he will also be committed to us as our great and faithful God. If you have any questions about Psalm 132, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me together on this Monday. Looking forward to reading together again on Wednesday from Psalm 133. And also, of course, looking forward Wednesday night to being together for our next Wednesday special study, which will be presented by Byron Nash, the preacher at the North Hickson Church in Chattanooga. He'll be talking about how God is spirit and holy. Looking forward to that on Wednesday nights. But before that, we'll be reading together again on Wednesday morning from Psalm 133. Just a couple more songs of ascent, and then we'll make our way through the rest of the Psalter for this year. Again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great Monday. Take care, and God bless.